In 1592, a famous writer in London publicly mocked a young man with no university degree, no noble background, and no real connections. He called him an upstart crow, a nobody pretending to be a great writer. That young man was William Shakespeare. At that moment, Shakespeare had two choices: walk away in shame, or prove to the world that words, not titles, create greatness. He chose to write. That insult became a turning point. From that moment, Shakespeare didn't just write plays. He wrote worlds. He built characters who felt more real than the people sitting in the audience. He used language like a sword, like a mirror, like a song. And without formal education or privilege, he became the most celebrated writer in the history of the English language. But how did this happen? How did a boy from a small town, with no money and no map for success, become the voice of love, power, ambition, and tragedy? And what can his story teach you about language, creativity, and your own dreams? In this video, you will follow the journey of William Shakespeare from the dusty streets of Stratford-upon-Avon to the glowing lights of the Globe Theatre. You'll hear the struggles he faced, the risks he took, and the passion that never left him. And as you listen, you'll also be improving your English, learning new words, practicing your listening skills, and discovering how language can move hearts. So before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We bring you powerful stories like this one to help you grow in English and in life. Now, let's begin the story of a man who lost everything, dreamed fearlessly, and changed the world with nothing but his words. It was April of 1564, in a quiet town called Stratford-upon-Avon, when a baby boy named William Shakespeare was born. His parents, John and Mary, held him close, not knowing their child would one day shape the future of literature and language. They were a modest family. John was a glove maker, a respected trade, but far from rich. Mary came from a farming family. Their home was simple, full of noise and life. William was the third of 8 children. Stratford was peaceful, with narrow streets, wooden houses, and a calm river. There were no theaters, no printing presses, no famous schools, only hardworking people trying to live well. But even in this small town, stories were everywhere. Traveling actors passed through sometimes, performing plays in open markets. Young William would watch, wide-eyed, standing in the crowd as characters came to life before him. He was not like other children. He was quiet but observant. He listened to how people spoke. He watched how they laughed, how they cried, how they argued. Even at a young age, he paid attention to emotions, their movement, their rhythm. He didn't know it yet, but he was studying life itself. At school, he learned Latin, poetry, and the classics of Rome and Greece. The classroom was small, the benches were hard, and the teachers were strict. But William found something magical in books. He read about ancient heroes, noble kings, and powerful gods. The words filled his imagination with places he had never seen and feelings he could barely describe. He wasn't wealthy, but in those pages, he felt rich. Still, life at home was not always easy. As William grew older, his father began to struggle with money. Debts increased, and the family's position in town slowly weakened. There were days when food was scarce, when stress filled the house more than laughter. But William did not complain. Instead, he observed. He turned pain into understanding. This emotional sensitivity would later become one of the most powerful tools in his writing. He also played. He ran through the fields, listened to the birds, and watched the clouds pass over Stratford. He would walk along the riverbank, lost in thought, creating little stories in his mind. He didn't dream of fame. He didn't even know what a playwright was. But he knew he loved words. He knew they had power. And even if no one around him could see it yet, something was already growing inside him, something that could not be silenced. As William moved into his teenage years, life around him continued to change. His father's business, once stable and respected, was falling apart. The debts grew heavier. The family, once considered middle class in Stratford, began losing their social position. For a young man who loved stories, the reality of daily struggle was a lesson he would never forget. By the age of 14, William had already read more than most people ever would. He had studied the great poets, listened to street performers, and heard every kind of human conversation, from merchants in the market to whispers in church. He didn't just hear words, he felt them. And yet, at home, pressure was building. There was no money for university. His future seemed unclear. Many boys at that time would have followed their father's trade, working with leather, becoming glove makers like John Shakespeare. But William wasn't drawn to the smell of rawhide or the rhythm of sewing. His heart beat faster when he heard poetry or watched a performance. Still, he had no clear path forward, only a mind full of words, and a quiet hunger to do something more. Then, something unexpected happened. At 18, William fell in love. Her name was Anne Hathaway. She was older than him, 8 years older, and lived in a nearby village. She was intelligent, independent, and strong-minded. Their relationship surprised many people in Stratford. At that time, it was unusual for a young man to marry an older woman, especially one who came from a different social background. But love rarely follows rules. Soon, Anne became pregnant, and society's expectations became louder. In November 1582, William and Anne married quickly. Just 6 months later, their first daughter, Susanna, was born. 2 years after that, they had twins, Hamlet and Judith. At just 21, William Shakespeare was not only a husband, but a father of 3. It was a beautiful time, but also a difficult one. He was now responsible for a family, yet he had no stable job. His father's business had declined. There was little money, and William didn't want to become a tradesman. What could he offer? He had no land, no title, no connections. All he had were stories in his head and a need to express them. But sometimes, that's all it takes. While others saw responsibility as a weight, William saw it as fuel. His dreams didn't disappear under pressure, they burned brighter. Each quiet evening in Stratford, after the children were asleep, he may have looked out the window and imagined something more. A life where his words would matter. A life where he could escape the walls of his hometown and reach a stage, a city, a world beyond. No one around him knew what he was capable of. Not yet. But the fire was already lit. After the birth of his twins in 1585, William Shakespeare seemed to disappear. For the next 7 years, no official records mention his name. Historians call this period the lost years, because no one knows for sure what he was doing, or where he even was. But something must have changed during that time. When his name finally appeared again, it was not in Stratford, but in the heart of London's theatre world. Some believe he became a schoolteacher, using his knowledge of Latin and literature to teach children of wealthy families. Others say he joined a group of traveling actors, learning how to perform and survive on the road. There's even a rumor that he got in trouble for hunting on a nobleman's land and had to flee Stratford to avoid punishment. The truth is, we may never know. But what matters is this: when he reappeared, he was no longer just a small-town boy with dreams. He was a writer ready to take on the stage. Leaving Stratford could not have been easy. He was a young father. His wife and children stayed behind. But William had made a decision. He would follow the one thing that never left him, his imagination. The theatres of London were alive with energy. Crowds gathered to see stories unfold. Actors became legends. Writers became voices of the people. It was a place of opportunity, but also competition. Shakespeare arrived with nothing but his talent. He had no money, no famous name, no formal education. But he listened. He observed. He studied the actors. He watched how people reacted to stories, when they laughed, when they cried, when they sat silent, holding their breath. He was learning the rhythm of the theater, and how to move an audience not just with action, but with words. It's possible that he spent those lost years in silence, preparing for something the world wasn't expecting. A new kind of writer. One who understood the beauty and the brutality of life. One who could turn ordinary language into poetry, and simple moments into unforgettable scenes. The years were lost on paper, but not in purpose. By 1592, William Shakespeare's name appeared in London for the first time, and soon, the world would know it too. London in the late 1500s was loud, dirty, crowded, and alive with drama. Theaters stood tall near the river, surrounded by markets, noise, and people from every corner of society. Audiences were wild and opinionated. They cheered, booed, threw fruit, and cried, all in the space of one performance. It was not a place for the weak. But for someone like William Shakespeare, it was a world of possibility. He started small, likely working as an actor, learning how a stage moves, how voices echo, and how a good line can silence 1,000 people. At first, he wrote simple plays, comedies, short histories, entertaining stories meant to make people laugh and come back for more. He understood what the audience wanted, truth hidden in entertainment, poetry dressed as laughter. But not everyone welcomed him. In 1592, a well-known writer named Robert Greene published a bitter pamphlet warning others in the literary world about a rising upstart crow. Without saying his name directly, Greene made it clear he was talking about Shakespeare, a young man from the countryside, with no university education, who was becoming too popular in the London theatre scene. Greene mocked him as someone who thought he could act like a real writer, using big words without the proper training. For Shakespeare, this insult was more than just an attack. It was a public rejection by the educated elite. But he didn't fight back with arguments or letters. He fought with plays. In the years that followed, his writing became sharper, deeper, and more daring. He wrote about kings and fools, lovers and liars, men haunted by power, and women torn by grief. He gave the stage something new, characters that felt alive. They spoke like people in the real world but carried the weight of poetry. Their dreams, mistakes, and fears reflected the hearts of the audience. And people noticed. By 1594, Shakespeare had become a key member of an acting company called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. He was writing regularly and acting too. His name was now printed on published plays. His words were spreading, not just in theaters, but in homes, books, and conversations. The boy from Stratford had survived the noise, the judgment, and the doubt. And now, he was rising, not by shouting louder than others, but by writing better than anyone else. By the end of the 1590s, Shakespeare was no longer just a name in the margins. He was now at the center of London's theatre world. His plays were filling seats. His characters were living in people's minds. But he wasn't done. He wanted more control, more freedom, and more space to let his imagination grow. In 1599, along with his fellow actors in the Lord Chamberlain's Men, Shakespeare helped build a new theatre on the south bank of the River Thames. They called it the Globe. It was round, open to the sky, and designed to hold thousands of people, from nobles to common workers. It didn't belong to a rich patron or a powerful nobleman. It belonged to the players themselves. And for Shakespeare, it was a home for his dreams. At the Globe, he wrote and performed some of his greatest works. The tragedies became deeper. The comedies, smarter. the histories, more human. One after another, he created plays that shaped the English stage forever. In Hamlet, a prince questioned life itself. In Macbeth, a man destroyed by ambition faced the darkness of his own mind. In Othello, love twisted into jealousy, and trust turned into tragedy. But Shakespeare's success didn't just come from the audience. It came from the crown. Queen Elizabeth I, in the final years of her reign, admired his work. His plays were performed for her court, and she protected the theatres, understanding how important they were for English culture. When she died in 1603, many feared the new king, James I, would shut down the stage. But the opposite happened. King James became Shakespeare's strongest royal supporter. He gave Shakespeare's company a new name, the King's Men, and placed them under his official protection. That title was more than an honor. It was a sign that the playwright from Stratford had reached the highest level of respect in England. Now, Shakespeare had a theatre, a company, and a king behind him. But even with fame and favor, he didn't slow down. His imagination only grew bolder. His plays took on more complex emotions, and his characters became reflections of life's deepest truths. He wasn't just entertaining anymore, he was exploring what it meant to be human. And inside the wooden walls of the globe, beneath the open sky, audiences laughed, wept, and held their breath, knowing they were watching something unforgettable. With the globe thriving and the favor of the king secured, Shakespeare entered the most powerful period of his career. By now, his name was not only respected, it was celebrated. His plays were published, performed, and praised across the country. And for the first time in his life, he had something that once seemed impossible: financial freedom. He invested his earnings wisely. Instead of spending it on luxuries in London, he bought land and property in his hometown of Stratford. One of those properties was called New Place, a large, elegant house where he would later retire. He also supported his family, helping both his parents and his children live in comfort. The glovemaker's son had become one of the wealthiest writers in England. But as his fortune grew, so did the emotional depth of his writing. Around this time, his plays began to change. The early sparkle of romantic comedies and lively histories gave way to something darker, more reflective. Life had given Shakespeare fame, but it had also given him loss. His only son, Hamlet, died at the age of 11. Though Shakespeare never spoke of it publicly, many believe that this heartbreak echoed in his later work. He began to explore the pain of aging, betrayal, and power. In King Lear, he told the story of a father destroyed by his own blindness and pride. In Macbeth, he explored guilt as a force that eats away at the soul. In The Tempest, he gave us a magician who chooses forgiveness over revenge, a character many believe reflected Shakespeare himself in his later years. These were not just plays. They were personal, honest, timeless. Audiences watched not just for entertainment, but for meaning. They came to see themselves reflected on stage, fathers and daughters, kings and fools, lovers and liars, all trying to make sense of a world that was beautiful and broken at the same time. And yet, even with all his success, Shakespeare remained private. He avoided politics. He rarely appeared in public. He let his work speak for him. And it spoke loudly. He had become more than a playwright. He was now a mirror of the human soul, showing people not only who they were, but who they could become. By 1611, Shakespeare had written nearly all of his greatest works. His name was known throughout England. His company, the King's Men, performed for royalty and commoners alike. His words lived not just in the theatre, but in people's hearts. And yet, after years of creation, travel, and applause, he made a quiet decision: he would go home. He returned to Stratford-upon-Avon, to New Place, the large house he had purchased with the fruits of his imagination. There, he chose a slower life. He walked in his garden. He spent time with his daughters, Susanna and Judith. He visited with friends. The crowds and the chaos of London were behind him now. What remained was peace. But his mind never stopped working. Even in retirement, people say he was always thinking, scribbling lines of poetry, whispering verses to himself, watching the sky like a man still chasing stories. Visitors from London would sometimes come to see him, hoping for advice or insight. But Shakespeare, as always, kept most of his thoughts quiet, letting his silence carry the weight of wisdom. Then, in April 1616, he attended a dinner with friends. It was a joyful night, full of laughter and wine. But soon after, he fell ill. Some say it was a fever. Others say it was the cold weather. Whatever it was, it came quickly. Within days, his health faded. Surrounded by family, he passed away on April 23, the same date many believe he was born, 52 years earlier. Before his death, he left a message, one final poem carved into the stone above his grave. He feared that others might move his body one day, so he wrote a warning. "Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." Even in death, his words were powerful. He was buried at Holy Trinity Church, the same place where he had been baptized as a baby. There was no grand monument, no crown, no gold. Just a simple grave, and a name that would outlive stone. Stratford fell silent. The world had lost its greatest storyteller. But his story was far from over. More than 400 years have passed since William Shakespeare took his final breath. And yet, his voice still echoes. In theaters, in classrooms, in conversations. His words are spoken in every corner of the world, in every language. His stories continue to move people, not because they are old, but because they are honest. He wrote about love that feels impossible, like Romeo and Juliet. About power that destroys, like Macbeth. About betrayal that cuts deep, like Julius Caesar. About questions we still ask ourselves today: who am I? What is right? What does it mean to forgive? His characters were not just kings, witches, or warriors. They were us. Confused, hopeful, broken, brave. He reminded us that words are not just sounds, they are tools to shape the world. And if Shakespeare could speak to you today, he might not talk about plays or fame. He would probably say this: your voice matters. Your story matters. You don't need a degree, or money, or permission to create something meaningful. He didn't have those things. What he had was a dream, and the courage to follow it. So if you've ever felt small, unheard, uncertain, remember him. The boy from Stratford who became the soul of a language. And ask yourself, what story is still waiting inside of you? And if you want to dive deeper into the world of Shakespeare, reading his works is a powerful way to improve your English. His plays, poems, and timeless wisdom are available in books made just for English learners. You can find editions on Amazon with helpful notes, modern translations, and beautiful designs. Check the link in the description or the first pinned comment to explore them. Reading his words will strengthen your vocabulary, listening, and confidence with the language. And by using our link, you also support this channel, so we can keep bringing you powerful stories like this one. Now it's your turn. Like this video if it inspired you, and comment below, what part of Shakespeare's story touched you the most? Let's inspire each other. And don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories that will help you learn English in a real, human, unforgettable way. As Shakespeare once wrote, "It is not in the stars to hold our destiny, but in ourselves." And maybe, just maybe, you are the next great storyteller the world is waiting for. Do you want to improve your English 20x faster? Whether it's grammar, conversation, or fluency, we have the perfect material for you. Click the link in the description or the first pinned comment and take your English to the next level.